Commander Marcus Cole stood at the back of the Great Hall, trying to make himself as small as possible. The Galactic Assembly Hall was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that showed the actual stars outside. Thousands of alien beings filled the space, each one more strange and wonderful than the last. And every single one of them looked at Marcus like he was dirt on their shoes. Humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel only 18 years ago. In galactic terms, they were babies. Newcomers. Most species in this room had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Some had been doing it for millions. To them, humans were barely worth noticing. Marcus was not here as an important person. Earth's government had sent him as a security consultant, which really meant someone we can afford to lose. His job was simple. Watch. Learn. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not embarrass humanity in front of the galaxy. Today was the most important political event in 3 sectors of space. Queen Salitha of the Valorian Dominion was being officially crowned. The Valorians were an ancient race of crystalline beings. Their bodies were made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. They ruled over 40 star systems and had more power than most species could dream of. Queen Salith sat on a throne made of pure light. She was young for a Valorian, only 800 years old. Her crystal skin was pale blue, and when she moved, she chimed like wind through glass bells. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Beside her stood High Prince Thalvex, her bonded consort. He was older, his crystal darker, and his eyes moved across the crowd like a predator watching for weakness. Marcus had been trained to watch people. It was what he did best. In his years as a soldier, and then as a security officer, he had learned to read body language. He had learned to spot lies. He had learned to see danger before it arrived. These skills had kept him alive through 3 wars on Earth. He hoped they would be useless here. They were not. The ceremony was long and complicated. There were prayers in languages Marcus did not understand. There were rituals involving light and sound and strange energies that made his skin tingle. Through it all, Marcus watched. He watched the queen. He watched the prince. He watched the servants who moved silently between the guests. One servant caught his attention. She was a young Valorian female, probably a commoner based on the dullness of her crystal. She carried a tray with a single cup on it. The cup was ancient, covered in symbols, clearly important. As she walked toward the queen's throne, her hands were shaking. Marcus frowned. Valorians did not shake. Their crystal bodies were too rigid for such movement. For one to tremble like that, something had to be very wrong. He watched closer. The servant's eyes kept moving toward Prince Thalvex. Each time she looked at him, she shook harder. Each time the prince gave her a tiny nod, so small that no one would notice. No one except someone who was trained to see such things. The cup was poison. Marcus knew it in his bones. His mind raced through the options. He had no proof. He had no authority. If he spoke out and was wrong, Earth would face terrible consequences. They might be banned from galactic society forever. His government had been very clear about this. Do not cause problems. But if he was right, the queen was about to die. The servant reached the throne. She bowed low and offered the cup to Queen Salitha. The queen smiled kindly at the nervous servant. She reached out with delicate crystal fingers and lifted the cup. Marcus watched Prince Thalvex. The prince was not breathing. His dark eyes were fixed on the cup with hungry intensity. In that moment, Marcus knew for certain this was murder. The queen raised the cup toward her lips. Marcus did not think about Earth. He did not think about consequences. He did not think about himself. He simply moved. His body crossed the ceremonial floor in 3 long strides. Alien dignitaries shouted in surprise as he pushed past them. Guards reached for weapons but were too slow. Marcus reached the throne and knocked the sacred cup from the queen's hands. Time seemed to stop. The cup flew through the air in a perfect arc. The ancient wine inside scattered across the crystal floor. Queen Salitha stared at Marcus with shock and confusion. Every being in the hall fell completely silent. Then the wine began to eat through the floor, wherever the liquid touched. The crystal dissolved with a horrible hissing sound. Smoke rose from the spreading holes. The poison was so strong that it destroyed one of the hardest materials in the galaxy like it was paper. That would have been the Queen's body. That would have been her heart. The silence lasted only a moment. Then chaos erupted. Guards appeared from everywhere. Energy weapons pointed at Marcus from every direction. Strong hands grabbed him and forced him to his knees. He did not resist, kept his eyes on the holes in the floor, watching the evidence of what he had prevented. "Seize him," Prince Thalvex's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This animal has committed sacrilege. He has touched the Queen. He has destroyed the sacred cup." Marcus felt the cold metal of restraints lock around his wrists. He could hear the angry voices of 1,000 alien dignitaries demanding his punishment. He could see the fear and confusion on Queen Sledless's face as she stared at the destruction on her floor. But he also saw something else. He saw the young servant who had carried the cup. She had collapsed against a pillar, her crystal body cracking with stress. She was crying without tears, her whole form vibrating with terror and relief. She had not wanted to do this. Someone had forced her. Prince Thalvex was already moving through the crowd, speaking to important figures, spinning his story. Marcus could guess what he was saying. The human did this. The human planted the poison. This was an attack by the primitive Earth species. It did not matter that the evidence showed otherwise. It did not matter that Marcus had no way to obtain such poison. In galactic politics, truth was less important than power. And Prince Thalvex had power. As the guards dragged Marcus away from the throne, he managed to look back one last time. Queen Salitha had not moved. She stood frozen, staring at the holes in her floor, then at the human who had saved her life. Their eyes met for just a moment. Marcus did not know what his future held. He did not know if anyone would believe the truth. He only knew that he had done the right thing. A person was about to die and he had stopped it. Everything else was just details. The great doors of the assembly hall closed behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. His fate was now in the hands of beings who saw him as little more than an animal. Even as darkness swallowed him, Marcus Cole felt no regret. Some choices were worth any price. The cell was cold and dark. Marcus sat on a hard bench, made of the same crystal that formed everything in Valorian space. His hands were still bound, and a collar around his neck prevented him from moving more than a few feet in any direction. They treated him like a dangerous animal. Perhaps, in their eyes, that was exactly what he was. Hours passed, or maybe days. There was no way to tell time in this place. No windows, no clocks. Just the soft hum of energy fields and the occasional sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. Marcus used the time to think, thought about his family back on Earth. His mother, who had cried when he left for this assignment. His younger sister, who had just gotten married. His father, who had served in the military before him and understood what duty meant. He wondered if they knew yet. He wondered if anyone had told them that their son might never come home. He thought about the Queen. The look on her face when the cup fell, the moment their eyes had met. Had she understood? Did she know he had saved her? Or did she believe the lies that Prince Thalvex was surely spreading? The door to his cell opened with a soft sound. A tall Valorian male entered, his crystal body glowing with inner light. He wore the robes of a judge, and his face showed no emotion at all. "Human," the judge said. "You have been charged with 17 violations of sacred law. You touched the Queen without permission. You destroyed a holy artifact. You disrupted a coronation ceremony. Each of these crimes carries the penalty of death." Marcus said nothing. There was nothing to say. Under Valorian law, no outsider may accuse a member of the royal bloodline. Therefore, your claim that Prince Thalvex was involved in a conspiracy cannot be heard. It cannot be recorded. It does not exist. The judge's voice was cold and final. You will be executed by crystalline dissolution. The process will begin at dawn. Crystalline dissolution. Marcus had heard stories about this punishment. The victim was placed in a chamber where their body was slowly transformed into crystal, starting from the feet and moving upward. It took 3 days. The victim remained alive and conscious for most of it. "Do you have anything to say?" the judge asked. Marcus looked up at him. The poison that was in that cup would have killed your queen. I saw the servant's fear. I saw the prince's signal. I acted to save a life. That is all. Your actions are not in question. Your motivations do not matter. You broke our laws. You will pay the price. The judge turned to leave, then paused at the door. I will say this, human. In my 4,000 years of service, I have never seen anyone move so fast. You crossed 30 feet of floor in less than 2 seconds. No one in that hall even had time to react. Whatever else you are not slow. The door closed. Marcus was alone again. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Every planet with a communication network heard the story. A human had attacked the Valorian queen at her coronation. Some versions said he had tried to kill her. Others said he had tried to kidnap her. The truth was buried under layers of political lies. On Earth, people watched the news in horror. Their representatives, sent to observe a peaceful ceremony, was going to be executed. The United Nations called emergency sessions. Diplomats sent angry messages to Valorian space. Protests filled the streets of every major city. But what could they do? Humanity had 12 warships. The Valorian Dominion had 12,000. Earth could shout all it wanted. No one had to listen. In the Galactic Assembly Hall, the discussions continued without pause. The coronation had been completed in a private ceremony, and Queen Sayla now officially ruled the Dominion. Prince Thalvex stood at her side, playing the role of concerned consort. The human must be executed publicly, he told the gathered ambassadors. This attack on Valorian sovereignty cannot go unpunished. If we show weakness, other species may be encouraged to similar violence. Most of the ambassadors nodded. They had no love for humans. These newcomers to space were strange and unpredictable. Better to make an example of one now than deal with problems later. But not everyone agreed. Ambassador Kirill of the Neth Collective raised one of his many limbs. The Neth were an insectoid species, known throughout the galaxy for their logic and careful observation. I was present when the incident occurred, Kirill said. I saw the human move. I saw the wine hit the floor. The timing does not support the theory that he planted the poison. Prince Thalvex's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting nothing. I am stating facts. The human had no opportunity to place poison in the cup. He was standing at the back of the hall. The cup never left Valorian hands until it was offered to the queen. If there was poison in that cup, the human did not put it there. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Prince Thalvex raised his hand for silence. The human could have accomplices. He could have bribed a servant. His primitive species is known for its deception and violence. Perhaps, Kirill replied. Or perhaps the human did exactly what he appeared to do. Perhaps he saved the queen's life. The hall fell silent. Everyone looked toward the throne where Queen Sayla sat watching the debate. Her face was unreadable. Her crystal body was perfectly still. The law is clear, Prince Thalvex said firmly. Regardless of the human's intentions, he committed sacrilege. He must die. The law is indeed clear, Kirill agreed. But laws can be changed. Perhaps this case calls for mercy. Mercy for an animal. Thalvex laughed. The Neth have always been too soft. Next, you will suggest we grant equal rights to bacteria. Queen Sayla finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the Great Hall. Enough. The execution will proceed as scheduled. This matter is closed. Prince Thalvex smiled in triumph. Ambassador Kirill bowed his head in defeat. The other ambassadors began to disperse, already forgetting the human who would die at dawn. But Queen Sayla remained on her throne, staring at nothing long after everyone else had gone. That night, she called for the investigation reports. She read them in her private chambers, alone, where no one could see the cracks forming in her crystal composure. The evidence was clear to anyone who looked carefully. The poison was rare, found only on 3 planets. All 3 were under Thalvex's control. The servant who had carried the cup had family in one of his labor camps. She had been forced to participate. Sayla knew the truth. Her consort had tried to kill her, and the only person who had noticed, the only person who had acted to save her, was a human from a species she had been taught to despise. She thought about what the judge had reported. The human had shown no fear. He had not begged for mercy. He had simply stated that he had acted to save a life. Why? That was what she could not understand. Humans had no connection to her. They gained nothing from her survival. Marcus Cole had thrown away his life for a stranger. It made no sense, unless he had not thought about it at all. Unless he had simply seen danger and acted. Unless saving lives was more important to him than saving himself. The concept was strange and foreign. In Valorian politics, everything was calculated. Every action had a purpose. Every gift came with strings attached. The idea that someone would sacrifice themselves for nothing, for no benefit at all, was almost impossible to believe. Almost Queen Salatha set down the reports and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the palace below her, a human was waiting to die for her. And she had to decide what kind of queen she wanted to be. The dawn was coming fast. Marcus woke to the sound of footsteps. Different footsteps than before. Lighter. More careful. He opened his eyes and saw something he did not expect. Queen Salatha stood at the entrance to his cell. She had come alone, without guards, without servants. Her crystal body glowed softly in the darkness, providing the only light. She looked smaller than she had on her throne, younger, more vulnerable. Marcus stood slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. The collar around his neck hummed a warning as he approached the limit of its range. "Your Majesty," he said simply. Salatha studied him for a long moment. "You knew you would die. When you ran toward me, you knew our laws. You knew there would be no escape. Yet you did it anyway. Why?" It was the same question everyone kept asking. Marcus had thought about how to answer it many times during his long hours in the cell. But in the end, the truth was simple, because you were about to be killed. And I could stop it. That is not an answer. That is a description of events. The Queen stepped closer. "I want to understand your reasoning, your calculation. What did you hope to gain?" Marcus shook his head. "There was no calculation. I saw danger. I acted. That is all. It's impossible. Every action has a purpose. Every being acts in their own interest. This is the fundamental law of existence. Maybe for your people, not for mine." Salah's crystal face showed something like frustration. "Then explain it to me. Use your primitive human words. Make me understand why you threw away your life for someone you had never met." Marcus sat back down on his bench. He thought for a moment, trying to find the right words. On Earth, we have a concept called honor. It does not translate well into your language. Most species think it means following rules or maintaining your reputation. But that is not what it really means. Then what does it mean? Honor means doing what is right, even when it costs you everything. Especially when it costs you everything. Marcus looked up at the Queen. The moment you start calculating whether someone deserves to be saved, you have already lost something important. Something more valuable than your own life. Salatha was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "My people have existed for over 100,000 years. We have built empires that span the stars. We have conquered science that your species cannot even imagine. And in all that time, no one has ever described such a concept to me." "Your people are very old," Marcus agreed. "Maybe some things get lost along the way. You think we have forgotten something? I think you have learned to survive, to calculate, to protect yourselves through intelligence and planning. Those are good things. They have kept your species alive for a very long time." Marcus paused. "But somewhere along the way, you stopped believing that some things are worth dying for. You stopped trusting your instincts. You stopped listening to the part of you that says this is wrong, or I must help without needing a reason." The Queen moved to sit on the opposite bench. It was strange to see her here, in this dark cell, sitting like an ordinary person. "My advisors tell me that your emotions make you weak. They say humans cannot control their impulses. They say, this is why your species will never be truly civilized. They might be right, Marcus said. We are emotional. We do act on impulse. We cry at sad stories and laugh at silly jokes. We fall in love with people who are wrong for us and make decisions that hurt ourselves. He smiled slightly. But those same impulses are what made me run toward you instead of away. That same lack of calculation is why you are still alive. Salitha looked at him with new eyes. You truly do not regret it. Even now, knowing you will die tomorrow, I would do it again. 1,000 times. 1,000,000 times. Because that is who I am. That is who we are. Marcus met her gaze steadily. Humans are not perfect. We have done terrible things throughout our history. We have wars and cruelty and greed, just like every other species. But we also have this ability to look at a stranger and see someone worth saving. This willingness to pay any price to protect the innocent. If that is weakness, then I am proud to be weak.
Ow.
The queen rose slowly. She walked to the cell door, then stopped and looked back. In 3 hours, you will be taken to the dissolution chamber. The process will begin, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. My consort has ensured that. Too many powerful people are watching. Marcus nodded. I understand. No, I do not think you do. Sayla's voice was strange, thick with emotion that her crystal form should not have been able to express. You taught me something tonight. Something my tutors and advisors never could. And I am going to have to watch you die for it. You do not have to watch. Yes, I do. It is the least I owe you. The queen opened the door. If there was another way, ... There is not. I know. Marcus stood and bowed his head respectfully. But I want you to know something, Your Majesty. Whatever happens tomorrow, you owe me nothing. A life saved is not a debt. It is a gift. And gifts come with no strings attached. Salitha stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into silence. Marcus sat back down and closed his eyes. He had made his peace with what was coming. He had said everything he needed to say. Now, all that remained was the waiting. But something was different in the palace above. Something had changed in the heart of a queen who had ruled her emotions for 800 years. A seed had been planted, a small crack in the crystal wall that separated her from her own feelings, in her chambers. Salathea stood before a mirror and looked at her own reflection. She thought about the human in the cell below. She thought about his words. She thought about honor and sacrifice and the strange idea that some actions needed no justification. She thought about her consort, sleeping peacefully in his rooms, confident that his plan had succeeded. He had tried to murder her. He would have succeeded if not for a primitive human with no calculation in his heart. What kind of queen did she want to be? The kind who let good people die for political convenience? The kind who ignored truth because lies were easier? The kind who valued stability over justice? Her people had lived for 100,000 years. They had built their empire on cold logic and careful planning. And perhaps that was why they had stopped producing heroes. Perhaps that was why no Valorian had stepped forward to save her. They were too busy calculating the costs. Salitha made a decision. It would not be easy. It might tear her empire apart. It would certainly destroy everything she had been taught to value. But as the human had said, some things were worth more than survival. Some things were worth everything. She called for her most trusted servants. There was much to prepare before dawn. The dissolution chamber was built in the oldest part of the palace, deep underground where the crystal walls were dark and ancient. It had been used for executions for 50,000 years. The room had seen emperors fall and rebels burn. Now it would witness the death of a human. Dignitaries from across the galaxy had gathered to watch. Many had traveled through the night, not wanting to miss this historic moment. It was not every day that a new species made such a dramatic entrance into galactic politics. And it was certainly not every day that one paid such a price for it. Marcus was brought in through a side door, his hands bound, his neck still circled by the control collar. He walked with his head high, looking straight ahead. The gathered aliens whispered among themselves. They had expected crying, begging, the usual display of primitive terror. Instead, the human moved like a soldier going into battle. Earth's ambassador stood in the crowd, tears running down her face. She had done everything possible to save her countrymen. It had not been enough. Now all she could do was witness his end and carry the story home. Prince Thalvex presided over the ceremony from a raised platform. He wore ceremonial robes and held the ancient staff that symbolized his authority as the queen's consort. His crystal face showed satisfaction poorly hidden behind a mask of solemn duty. "Beings of the galaxy," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "we are gathered to witness justice. This human committed crimes against the Valorian crown. He violated sacred law. He disrupted the most holy ceremony of our people. Today, he will answer for these crimes." The crowd murmured in approval. Most of them had already decided the human was guilty. The evidence did not matter. The truth did not matter. What mattered was power, and Prince Thalvex had power. Marcus was led to the dissolution platform. It's a circular stage in the center of the room. Above it hung the beam projector that would slowly transform his living flesh into dead crystal. It was designed to cause maximum pain. It was designed to make an example. "Human," Thalvex said. "Do you have final words?" Marcus looked out at the assembled aliens. Thousands of eyes, sensors, and other organs focused on him. Species from across the galaxy gathered to watch him die. He could have been afraid. He could have been angry. Instead, he felt a strange kind of peace. "I have a message," he said, his voice clear and steady. "For the people of Earth." Thalvex waved his hand impatiently. "Speak then. Make it brief." Marcus took a breath. "My friends, my family, my people, do not let this change who you are. The galaxy is old and tired and has forgotten things that we still remember. They call our compassion weakness. They call our instinct to help others a flaw. They are wrong." Crowd shifted uncomfortably. This was not the begging they had expected. "Keep your hearts open. Keep your courage bright. Run toward danger when innocence needs saving. Stand up for strangers, even when it costs you everything. That is what makes us human. That is what we bring to the stars." Marcus smiled slightly. "The galaxy needs us more than they know, even if they will not admit it." Prince Thalvex gestured to the guards. "Enough. Begin the dissolution." The beam projector began to hum. Energy gathered above Marcus, preparing to descend. The crowd leaned forward, eager to witness the spectacle, and then a voice rang out across the chamber like a bell. "Stop." Every head turned. Every eye shifted. Standing at the entrance to the chamber, glowing with inner light so bright it hurt to look at, was Queen Saelatha. She walked forward through the crowd, which parted before her like water before a ship. Her crystal body radiated power and authority. Her face showed determination that none had ever seen before. "Your Majesty," Thalvex said, his voice suddenly uncertain, "this is most irregular. The sentence has been passed. The law demands I am the law." Saelatha climbed the steps to the platform and stood before her consort. "I invoke the right of royal truth. Let all evidence be heard. Let all witnesses speak. Let justice be done in the light, not hidden in shadow." Gasps filled the chamber. The right of royal truth had not been invoked in 3,000 years. It gave the monarch absolute authority to override any legal proceeding, to demand complete honesty from all present, to expose any conspiracy, no matter how powerful those involved. "You cannot do this," Thalvex hissed, his composure cracking. "The political consequences, I can. I will. I must." Saelatha turned to address the assembly. "This human saved my life. The cup he knocked from my hand was poisoned with crystalbane, a substance so rare that only 3 planets produce it. All 3 planets are controlled by my consort." Shocked silence fell over the crowd. "The servant who carried the cup has family in labor camps owned by my consort. She was forced to participate in the plot. She has already given full testimony to my investigators." Saelatha's voice grew stronger with each word. "Prince Thalvex planned to kill me and rule through my younger sister as regent. The only reason I am alive today is because a human, a member of a species we dismiss as primitive, saw what my own people missed and acted without hesitation. Dalvex backed away, his dark crystal face showing fear for the first time. This is lies. Conspiracy. The human has poisoned your mind, guards. Arrest him. It happened quickly. Valorian soldiers appeared from the shadows and surrounded the prince. He struggled briefly, then went still as they restrained him. His eyes never left Salitha, burning with hatred. You are destroying everything, he spat. 40 star systems will fall into chaos. This is what you want? For a human? No. Sayla walked to where Marcus still stood on the dissolution platform. She reached out and removed his restraints herself, letting the metal fall to the ground. I am doing this for myself, for my people, for what we should have been all along. She turned to face the gathered dignitaries. Ambassadors from 100 worlds stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to something that might have been hope. This human taught me something my civilization forgot long ago. Sayla's voice carried to every corner of the chamber. He showed me that true nobility is not found in power or calculation. It is found in the willingness to sacrifice everything for a stranger, expecting nothing in return. She placed her crystal hand on Marcus's shoulder. Commander Marcus Cole of Earth acted with honor. He saw a life in danger and moved to save it without thought for himself. This is not the behavior of an animal. This is the behavior of someone more civilized than we have ever been. The crowd was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. The Valorian Dominion formally recognizes the human concept of honor as defined by this man's actions. Sayla raised her head high, and we declare that we have much to learn. Marcus stood in shock. Minutes ago, he had been ready to die. Now he was standing beside a queen who had just torn her empire apart to save him. He did not know what to say. He did not know what to feel, so he did the only thing that felt right. He bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. Sayla smiled. It was a strange expression on a crystal face, but somehow it worked. No, Commander. Thank you for reminding us what we forgot. Earth's ambassador pushed through the crowd, sobbing with relief. Other humans in attendance, technicians, assistants, observers rushed forward to embrace their countryman. They had come to watch him die. Instead, they witnessed the birth of something new. The galaxy would never be the same. And it had started with a single act of unthinking courage. 5 years had passed since. The day Marcus Cole saved a queen and nearly died for it. 5 years since a young civilization from a small blue planet had taught the galaxy something it had forgotten. 5 years since everything began to change. Marcus stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly. It's the same room where he had once been arrested for touching royalty. Now he stood at the central podium, wearing the formal uniform of Earth's official ambassador. Around him sat representatives from over 200 species. Gathered for the annual summit that shaped interstellar policy, he was still not comfortable with crowds. He still preferred the quiet of his office to the noise of ceremonies. But duty was duty, and there was work to be done. Distinguished delegates, he began. We gather today to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Cole Doctrine. The Cole Doctrine. That was what they called it now. Marcus had not asked for his name to be attached to it. He had actually argued against it. But the galaxy had decided, and there was no changing their minds. The doctrine was simple in principle, but revolutionary in practice. It stated that certain moral actions transcended political calculation, that protecting the innocent was not a sign of primitive thinking, but the highest expression of civilization, that some duties existed regardless of cost or consequence. It had taken years to spread. Many species had resisted the idea at first. It went against everything they had been taught. But slowly, example by example, act by act, the concept of honor had begun to take root. A Neth soldier had thrown himself in front of a poisoned blade meant for a human child. Even though humans had once been enemies of his people, when asked why, he had simply said it was the honorable thing to do. A Valorian captain had disobeyed direct orders to save a transport ship full of refugees, knowing it would end her career. Some things matter more than rank, she had explained at her trial. The court had acquitted her unanimously. A coalition of 12 species had formed the honor guard, military force dedicated to protecting civilians regardless of political boundaries. They wore no national symbols. They served no government. They answered only to the principle that innocent lives must be protected. These were small changes in a vast galaxy. But small changes added up, drop by drop. The ocean was shifting. Queen Salitha sat in the place of honor at the summit, her crystal form catching the light as always. She had become humanity's strongest ally in the years since Marcus had saved her life. Her empire had undergone profound reforms, abandoning the cold calculation that had defined Valorian politics for thousands of years. It had not been easy. There had been rebellions. There had been assassination attempts. There had been moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart. But Saliva had held firm, guided by a new understanding of what leadership meant. We measured civilization by power, she had told her people, by conquest, by longevity. We were wrong. Civilization is measured by how we treat those who cannot benefit us. By whether we act with honor when it costs us everything. Many had disagreed. Many still did. Change came slowly to ancient peoples set in ancient ways. But the young Valorians listened. And they learned, and they began to see humans not as primitive animals, but as teachers of something precious. Earth had changed too. When Marcus returned home, he had been greeted as a hero. Parades, ceremonies, offers of money and power. He had turned down all of it. He did not want fame. He did not want reward. He only wanted to continue serving in whatever way was needed. But his example had inspired a generation. Human schools now taught the story of the assassination attempt and its aftermath. Children learned about honor not as an abstract concept, but as a practical guide for living. Be brave. Be kind. Help others. Some things are more important than yourself. The galaxy had once dismissed humanity as newcomers with nothing to offer. Now species that had traveled the stars for millions of years sent their young to Earth to study human philosophy and ethics. They came to understand how a species so young could produce individuals willing to die for strangers. The answer, they discovered, was not complicated. Humans were not special because of their technology or their intelligence or their physical abilities. They were special because they cared. They felt deeply. They loved fiercely. And they were willing to act on those feelings even when reason said they should not. This was what the old civilizations had lost. Somewhere in their long histories, they'd learned to suppress their emotions, to calculate every action, to never act without considering the consequences. They had become safe. They had become successful. But they had also become cold. Humans reminded them what warmth felt like. The summit continued for 3 days. Trade agreements were signed. Disputes were settled. Alliances were formed. But the most important business happened in the quiet moments between official sessions. When beings from different worlds sat together and talked about things that mattered, on the final day, a young delegate approached Marcus during a reception. She was from a species he did not recognize, her body covered in soft feathers that changed color with her emotions. "Ambassador Cole," she said nervously, "may I ask you something?" Marcus smiled. He had grown better at dealing with such encounters over the years. "Of course. That day, when you saved the Queen, did you ever regret it? Even for a moment?" It was a question he had been asked many times. The answer was always the same. Not once. Not ever. How can you be so certain? You almost died. You could have lost everything. Marcus thought for a moment before answering. There is a difference between thinking and calculating. Calculating asks, what will this cost me? Thinking asks, what is the right thing to do? That day, the right thing was obvious. Someone was about to die, and I could stop it. Everything else was just noise. The young delegate considered this for a long moment. Her feathers shifted through several colors, reflecting emotions Marcus could only guess at. "We have no word for this in my language," she admitted. "You will," Marcus said gently. "Give it time." Later that evening, Marcus walked alone through the halls of the assembly building. The celebrations had ended, and the delegates had returned to their ships and their worlds. The great rooms that had been filled with thousands of beings were now quiet and empty. He stopped before a new monument that had been unveiled during the summit. It was a simple pillar of white stone, unmarked by symbols or decorations, but carved into its surface, in over 1,000 languages, was a single word and its definition: honor, the courage to do what is right, especially when it costs everything. First taught to the galaxy by the humans of Earth, Marcus stood before the monument for a long time. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. The fear and the pain and the long nights in a dark cell. The moment when he had been certain he would die. The miracle of being saved by the very person he had saved. He thought about his family, waiting for him back on Earth. His mother, who still cried every time he came home safely from another mission. His sister, who now had children of her own, who called him Uncle Marcus and demanded stories about aliens. His father, who had served before him and understood in a way no one else could what it meant to do your duty regardless of cost. He thought about Queen Salitha, who had become not just an ally but a friend. About the Neth and the Valorians, and all the other species who were slowly learning to feel again. About the young delegates who came to him with questions, hoping to understand something their own cultures could not teach them. The stars outside the window burned cold and bright, unchanged by the small dramas of the beings who lived beneath them. But something had shifted in the darkness between those stars. Something warm had taken root in the cold equations of galactic politics. Marcus Cole had not set out to change the universe. He had simply done what felt right in a moment when thinking would have taken too long. And from that single act, a new idea had been born. The galaxy was learning what honor meant. It would take generations, perhaps centuries, for the lesson to fully take hold. But it had begun. And beginnings were everything. Marcus turned from the monument and walked toward the shuttle that would take him home. There was more work to do. There were more lessons to teach. And there were people waiting who loved him, which was the greatest honor of all. Behind him, the monument stood silent in the empty hall. A promise carved in stone, a gift from a young species to an old galaxy. The courage to do what is right, especially when it costs everything. That was what honor meant, and the stars would remember.